Hey everybody, I have a couple of thought-provoking questions for you, and these are thoughts that have plagued me for many, many years. How do you know what you know? How do we know that modern scientific theory is correct? How can we know anything at all? Throughout the last 5 or 6 years of my life, I've had a motto of mine. It's question everything. Throughout my 20s, I'm 31, I really struggled with what's real, what to believe in. I even struggled with nihilism at times. And a lot of this stemmed from when I left the church that I grew up in. I didn't have any direction. I didn't have any foundation anymore. I just saw everything wide open. I didn't have any beliefs. And that was very paralyzing for a long time because I didn't think I knew enough about anything to take a step in any sort of direction. I kind of just wandered around aimlessly trying to figure things out. So when I discovered Socrates' quote, "The only thing I know is I know nothing," that immediately hit me because it makes so much sense. I don't know anything. I don't know if the reality that I'm experiencing right now is actually real. And the more that you dive into things like quantum physics or a guy named Donald Hoffman, the Hoffman, who has some very, very interesting theories about what he thinks reality is, the more things just don't make sense. The deeper you tend to dive into a subject, the more questions that arise. And I always looked around at people thinking, how do they know the things that they know? How can people go around being so confident all the time? Where do they get this confidence from? How do they know these things? The realization that nobody really knows, everybody just kind of is figuring things out the best that they can, was life changing for me because it almost gave me permission to just flounder and try and figure things out. But back to Donald Hoffman, he is an American cognitive psychologist. And essentially, the things that he teaches is that if you get deep enough into the math of evolutionary theory, that eventually the math doesn't make sense anymore. And he ties this into Godels' Incompleteness theorem, which essentially says that any fundamental or foundational theory on reality is going to reach a point where it's based off assumptions that are required in order to make the theory make sense. I love evolutionary theory. I think it's fascinating. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's so easy to be able to say, oh, human behavior works like this because 2 million years ago we had to act like this, and this is what caused us to evolve and develop into the kind of people that we are now. I think one of the flaws of evolutionary theory that I come back to, and maybe I just haven't done enough research on this. I'm sure there's some people out there that would be able to help me see through this. But how do we know that if evolutionary theory is real, in order to be survival of the fittest, we developed a way of seeing reality that doesn't accurately represent how reality is. We just see what we need to see based off of our five senses in order to be able to function and survive. I listened to a podcast episode on Curt Jaimungal's podcast where he brought David Hoffman on and a guy named Yosha Bach, and they had a fascinating discussion about consciousness and how Einstein's theory of relativity breaks down at a certain point. It was all, a lot of stuff that went right over my head. But I was able to follow it enough to kind of get an idea of what they talk about. But you should definitely go check this out if this is something that you find fascinating like I do. But back to Socrates. So when I heard his quote about the only thing I know is I know nothing, it clicked with me immediately, but it also took me a while to make sense of it because here is a guy who is the Western father of modern philosophy, essentially. And, he gave way to Plato, who gave way to Aristotle. So he started these names that are still really popular today and have still had a huge effect on the way that we view the world. So if that was really true, the only thing he knew is that he knows nothing. How did he still come to terms with reality the way that he did, and how did he create a philosophy that was so powerful it's lasted as long as it has? I think what I've come up with for me is that there's really no way you can know anything. You just have beliefs that what you're seeing is actual reality or what you believe in, whether it's religion or scientific theories. You just kind of have to take faith on those things. There's no way we could possibly know if they're true or not. Those are still beautiful methods of exploring the world because even though we can't know anything with absolute certainty, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and figure it out. That doesn't mean it's not a worthwhile cause. So that's the way that I've adopted it into my life. I know that I know nothing, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to try and be the best person that I can be and try and create a reality for my family that's going to benefit them and me as well. So I don't know if this video is going to find its way to anyone that thinks the way that I do, that questions everything, that struggles with possibly nihilism or what's the point of anything. I know I spent almost a decade circling those feelings, and it's been a long road to get to where I am right now. Another thought that I have a lot: in 1,000 years from now, are we going to look back at this period of time and think that modern science was barbaric, laugh at it because it makes no sense anymore? History kind of shows that there's a chance of that happening. I know that we look back on things like the world is flat, or theories that were around before theory of relativity really became the go-to theory in physics. But anytime I hear people talk about concrete science, that's what I keep going back to, is like, how do we know that in another 100, 200, 500 years from now, that's going to be disproven 100 times over? I'm not saying don't take science seriously. I base a huge portion of my life around modern science. I think there's a lot of value in applying it and learning from it. And again, I find it fascinating. I love science, and it clearly has done a lot for the benefit of mankind. There's clearly truth to it. I just don't know what the bottom line of that is. And I kind of view religion somewhat seriously. I grew up Mormon, actually. I haven't been a part of that church for 12, 13 years now. I don't ever see myself being religious again. There reaches a certain point, especially with religions, where you just have to assume that your faith is the truth. You have to assume things that are unprovable are reality. I have no problem with people doing that, especially if it's beneficial to their lives. There's been a lot of good things that have happened in religion. There's been a lot of bad things that have happened throughout history with religion as well, but it's very, very beneficial to a lot of people, more so than it's negative to people. It's hard for me to fully buy into anything that's going to require a set of assumptions to reach a certain end. It all comes back to I don't even really know how to say his name. Godels Incompleteness Theorem, Godel. But everything kind of ties back to that for me, and that eventually anything that we've come across so far reaches a set of assumptions that we just can't prove. And with all that being said, I do live my life with a lot of beliefs that aren't really provable. I have a belief that this YouTube channel is going to change my life. I have a belief that I'm capable of reaching an income that's going to allow my wife to quit her job, for me to fulfill dreams I have and my family has. And I don't really have anything to back that up. I don't have any proof to say that I'm going to do those things. It's just a belief in myself that I'm capable of achieving things that most people don't believe that they're capable of doing. So I'm really curious, do you question everything? And if you don't, are there some things that maybe you should be questioning more? I don't ever see myself not questioning everything. I think it's really beneficial. It allows me to get clarity in situations that are really hard to get clarity in. And it helps me keep an open mind, which is extremely beneficial because it allows me to see new opportunities as they present themselves. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Please let me know. This is something I'd love to get feedback from people on, just because I really want to know what other people's thought process is. I hope this video was some value to you. Please like and subscribe below. Thanks for watching.